Welcome, everyone. We're going to give folks a chance to hop on. I just want to thank you for showing up on time and in wonderful numbers. So we'll get it started in just a minute. All right, let's get started. Hey, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Babies and Bailouts. This is our second year, and we are so excited to have you either in the Zoom room or on Facebook or whatever other platform that we will be eventually sharing this on. My name is Paige Ingram, and I am the community organizer with Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. And we've been supporting the national bailout work for a few years now and really trying to help amplify this work in faith communities. And I am so happy to be joined by some amazing panelists. And also we have some folks on our team from Team Sankofa. They are the organizing arm of Black Lives of UU, and they are here to help us make sure that we get questions answered and that we are lifting up things that we may have missed. And so I just want to take a moment to introduce Renee Reed, Atina Danner, and Asia. So they're just going to be helping out in the background. And we also have L.A. McCrae, who is going to be opening up with some beautiful words. But first, I'm going to show y'all just a few videos to help to orient us to this work. And then we will dig right in.
I'm currently incarcerated at Santa Rita Jail in Dublin, California.
They're not doing anything to make sure that we stay healthy and safe out here in Santa Rita.
This pandemic is laying bare a lot of fundamental truths about our society and exaggerating existing dynamics and inequities.
They are very negligent. They do not give us cleaning supplies to clean up our pods, such as sanitizer or wipes.
They posted a lot of signs saying that we should keep our hands clean, but the problem is that a lot of people can't afford soap to keep their hands clean.
They are still bringing in new people from the street, and they are not quarantining them.
People testing positive over here. They check their temperatures maybe like twice a day, but they're not even quarantining these guys.
Being in jails, prisons, and detention centers has always been bad for our health.
I'm very worried that if I was to catch this virus in here, I would not be seen by anybody, and I probably would get worse.
I have lung disease. I could die immediately, maybe within a week or two after contracting coronavirus. If they want me to wait to show symptoms, it's going to be too late.
They're not doing nothing, man. If something breaks out in this jail, it's going to be a whole lot of people that die.
This virus, COVID-19, does not differentiate between people who are near the end of their sentence and those who are not, between people who have different types of convictions or charges, and neither should we.
So that was a video from the Ella Baker Center, and we really wanted to lift this up because it's undeniable the state that we're in. And although this work is work that has been ongoing and that will continue to be urgent, we have to acknowledge the political environment that we're in. We have to acknowledge this pandemic that is affecting us all, but definitely affecting us in different ways. And this video really highlights that. And so it's really important for us to make sure to acknowledge what's going on, but also recognize that this is a fight that's ongoing and that will continue after this pandemic weans off. And we also want to play another video just to orient folks around the work that National Bailout is doing, in particular around freeing Black mamas. So let's have a look at that.
Each year for Mother's Day, people gather to celebrate their mamas.
But this year for Mother's Day, we're getting together to bail Black mamas out of cages and get Black mamas free. Thousands of Black mothers are trapped in jails, separated from their children, their families, and their communities because they cannot afford to pay bail.
These people have not been convicted of a crime. These are just people that are languishing just because someone said that they may have done something. Bail has been a true driver and determinant of folks' freedom versus their detainment. In the past 2 years, we bailed out over 300 community members. We've been able to support a good majority of those folks, and we've been able to really be in community and fellowship. This May will be our 3rd year that we will be bailing out Black mamas and caregivers from your local jails and immigrant detention centers. Mamas and caregivers should not be held in cages.
This year, make your gift count. Bring a mama home for Mother's Day.
Okay, y'all. So we know what we're doing. We know why we're here. And I want to take a moment as folks have really settled in to make sure to run through a few things, including the fact that we really want to make sure that that throughout this time that we are amplifying ways that folks can support this work. We know that these are really difficult times, particularly for churches and congregations. And as with everyone, there's a high level of uncertainty. But there are a lot of ways that we can really support this work. And so we want to make sure to amplify that throughout this time, because there are so many opportunities, including something that we are encouraging congregations to do, which is adopting a bailout. Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism has adopted the bailout in Kansas City, Missouri with the Real Justice Network. And so I'll make sure to dig into that a little bit more. I also want to let y'all know just a few tech things. So we are doing this in webinar format as opposed to a typical Zoom room. So for folks that are not really sure how to navigate that, we still have our chat box so folks can chat in here, talk about what is resonating for folks throughout this time. There's also a Q&A. And then for folks who are joining in via Facebook, feel free to chat and engage and ask questions in the comment section. We have folks from Team Sankofa that are holding down that work of fielding those questions. Make sure to use the hashtag babies and bailouts so that we can keep track. I'll also make sure to let y'all know that you can donate directly to National Bailout by going to bit.ly/BLUU I'll make sure to put that in the chat, and you'll also see it directly on the Facebook live stream. And you can follow us on all platforms, including Twitter at Black Lives UU, Instagram at Black Lives at UU. And if you're seeing us, then you've already found us on Facebook. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to LA to give us some opening words, and then I'll introduce our panelists.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for taking time out of your lives to join us on this day. Sincerest gratitude to all of you for the moment to which we are being called, to our esteemed panelists, and to our wisdom circle, practitioners in this project of liberation, Team Sankofa and BLUU. This evening, we are here not just to learn, but to put that learning into practice as we engage abolition as practitioners in the project of liberation, freeing Black mamas. For some of you, wrapping your head around being an abolitionist just seems too big. I get that. You wonder if no jails, what will happen next? How does this happen? Yes, these are big, hard, complex questions. We see you. Angela Davis said, being radical is just grasping things at the root. And yes, we want to be radical. It's in the design. We want to grab at the root, at the very root, and change at the core of the root. The prison industrial complex, the school to prison pipeline, mass incarceration, the police state, state-sanctioned violence, and murders, all of it. And today, we are grateful for your presence. You showed up. You took the first step. Thank you. We witness you. And there are others here today who are eager to take the next step in this project of liberation through their abolition work. For some of you, that's looked like hosting events or perhaps talking about babies and bailouts to folks in your communities, workplaces, and congregations. Perhaps it's sponsoring a bailout and inviting friends and family to do the same. Today, we intentionally name and hold space for those who are genderqueer, non-binary, non-conforming, two-spirited, queer, trans, the whosoever's out there. As abolitionists, we are concerned with modern triple abolition against white supremacy and racism, heteronormativity and heterosexism and classism. Your struggle is our own. We are here as comrades on the journey for you and your liberation as well. But today, wherever you find yourself, however you find yourself, you are here on purpose. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being present as we welcome you into this great project, this project of believing. The great believing that makes a way out of no way, that sets free the oppressed, that tears down walls of bias, bigotry, and racism. The great believing which compels us to act as justice makers because we know we can make justice in our lifetimes. That great believing that has provided a vision so bold that Black mamas can use their very lives as sacred context for their healing and liberation. That great believing that somehow connected you to this space tonight, that provides hope where there is brokenness and despair. We are people of that great believing, and there is room for all. Welcome to this table. I'd like to give you these words as we center on purpose, as we consider and hold in our consciousness Black women who are locked in cages, separated from their families, particularly and especially during this time of national pandemic. But the truth is, for these women, for our genderqueer and trans kindred, they have been living at the intersections of multiple generational pandemics unrelentingly for the entirety of their lives, holding the weight and trauma of our collective national burdens of white supremacy carried on their backs. As they shepherded in a new generation of Black excellence, our kindred, our soul fam, we hold tight. As they exchanged your names for inmate numbers, put chains on your flesh, and revoke your freedom, we see you and we witness you. We close as we begin with these words from the great prophet according to the book of Jimmy. For those of you who are unaware, that would be James Baldwin, of course. Here are these slightly adapted words. My sisters and kindred, we know how great a price has been paid to bring into existence a new consciousness, a new people, an unprecedented nature. And if we know, my sisters, and we do, about the unjust revocation of your freedom, the denial of your inherent worth and dignity, and do nothing, we are worse than the murderers, politicians, illegitimate and hiding presidents, jailers, prosecutors, judges, correctional officers, probationers hired in our name. If we know, and we do, then we must fight for your life as if it were our own, which it is, and render impossible with our bodies, with our dollars, with our time, with our talent, with our treasures. We must render impassable the gates, the doors, the entry points, the sally ports in the jail cells. Beloved, for if they take you in the morning, they will come for us that night. Ashe. Thank you.
Ashe, and thank you so much, LA, for those words. This is what we do at BLUU. This work is spirit work. It's heart work, and making sure to remind ourselves to be in our spirits and to be in our bodies as we do this work, and remind ourselves as to why. It makes all the difference. So what I would like to do, I think, as opposed to reading your beautiful bios that we will put out there for folks to be able to read, is for each of the panelists to be able to say who they are in their own right, and to tell a story. And so I wanted to start with Ashley Henderson. If you can just let us know who you are, what brings you here, and give us paint us a picture of where we are right now in this fight.
Word. Well, first of all, I'd love to say good evening to everybody, to all of our fam that are joining in here on the Zoom, and to my comrades and siblings that are tuning in on Facebook. I bid you good evening. I'm also super grateful to you, Paige, and to Leslie Mack, who are the folks that gave me entry to understanding the power of BLUU. I'm grateful for y'all's leadership. As Paige said, I'm Ashley Woodard Henderson. My homies call me Ash. I use she, her pronouns, or any said respectfully and in right relationship. And I'm the first Black woman executive director of a place called the Highlander Research and Education Center in Newmarket, Tennessee. And I come to this work as a member of the Movement for Black Lives, who was in those original meetings, particularly the one where Mary Hooks from Southerners on New Ground had the brilliant idea that maybe what we could do to be in the tradition of abolitionists before us was to bail out Black mamas and caregivers, and break the back of the money bail system, which keeps too many of our people incarcerated. I'm a member of the advisory committee of the National Bailout Collective, and I'm proud to be a part of a growing movement of people that have said enough is enough, and we don't want to be in any sort of an idea of beloved community where some of our people don't get to be a part of it because they're in cages. I think where we are right now is in a reality where the majority of our people that are in cages aren't there because they've been convicted of doing any harm. They're there because they can't afford to pay their way out after being accused of a harm. And I think that that's just immoral, right? From my positionality, both as a person of faith, a practicing person of faith, and just as a regular concerned resident of the planet Earth, we should not be in any sort of free society where we put people in cages that way. What we know is that that doesn't do anything to keep people more safe, right? It doesn't do anything to give people access to more resources so that they don't create harm in the first place. We also know that the people that get to make the rules about what harm is aren't our communities, right? And so for 1,000 different reasons that are related to capitalism, to white supremacy and anti-Black racism, to ableism, right? Because we know also that prisons are used as forms of mental health services, and we know that that shit don't fly. Because of xenophobia and thinking that we can control people's movement. All of these systems of oppression that we've inherited are why people are locked up. And I think that, you know, pulling from what the amazing Pat Hussein, one of the founders of Southerners on New Ground, said is like, and to paraphrase it, it's like all those systems of oppression got our people in those cages in the first place, not anything that is innate to our people, right? And what's real is that we now have an opportunity as people of goodwill to get them out. And that's in a long line of abolitionist tradition, right? That our people have been buying our way out of enslavement for as long as Black people in particular have been in this country. And what we have an opportunity to do now is not only to get them out, but to make sure that we're supporting financially the supportive services that will keep them out. And I'm excited to talk and be building with BLUU Crew to be a part of the movement that's doing that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ash. I really appreciate that grounding and that reminder of where we are and some of the amazing people who have really made this movement possible. I want to turn it over to you, Samantha. I am so happy to have you here. I've just been admiring and clapping and cheering with all the things that you're doing from afar. And I just want to hear a little bit more about, especially in this moment, what is the experience of doing bailouts, and more broadly, you know, I think you do a wonderful job of making a very good spiritual and moral argument for abolition, and how do you see your work in an organizing lineage?
Well, thank you so much for just the opportunity to come and speak to the BLUU Crew. Paige, I am just really grateful for your leadership and your vision. And I am really grateful to be a part of this dynamic conversation with these really brilliant and amazing people who have been doing amazing work. I am Samantha Master. I am just one member of Free Black Mamas DMV, which is a collective of organizers in the DMV, Black women organizers in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, who came together curious about what it could mean if Black women were at the head of these conversations that were impacting our lives, very much in the spirit of the National Bailout and all of the amazing work that we're lucky to be in partnership with. And I can say that, like, one, shout out to Kiana Johnson, who's currently leading Free Black Mamas NBO, and all of her brilliance and wisdom that she's bringing into this. I think that when we talk about our work locally and also in the conversations we've been in with the National Bailout, we very much think of this as building freedom houses along the way. And so in no space has freedom just kind of happened, right? It is always the process of building in the imaginations of comrades, of collective vision and work and collective organizing. And so we are building safe houses for our people along the route to freedom, knowing that in those safe houses, people need a little bit of water, a little bit of food, a little bit of some safety, right? And so we think about this as the building work of those safe houses. And that speaks to, I think, in the DMV, and I think also nationally, the spirit of Black folks, as folks who have been, we have been pooling collective monies to buy each other's freedom, as Ash said. And so we are not only buying each other's freedom, but again, in the words of Ash, like building supportive services, because we are advocating for decarceration, but we also know that decarceration without access to supportive services like housing and food in this moment where people need mutual aid, diaper stations, like community and feeling like they are connected to community are invaluable resources that we owe each other. And the cage is not a mechanism for justice that provides any of those things. And so what we really want to do is transform the ways that we relate with each other. And one thing I will say lastly is that in this moment where there's a lot of energy around mutual aid, I think that one space that we ought to be looking to, that I've found a lot of brilliance in looking towards, are NBO and the bailouts, about how do we practice mutual aid in a way that honors the dignity and the humanity of people who are in need right now. And who are needing of support. And I think that is something that is a lesson that folks providing aid to communities can just be really mindful at looking at.
Thank you so much, Samantha. That's wonderful, and I appreciate you tying in mutual aid. That's something that the Highlander Center in particular has spent a lot of time really educating people on and skilling people up on. And it's important to see how all of these things are interconnected. I wanna speak to you, Erin. and give you a moment to introduce yourself. This panel is called Babies and Bailouts for a reason. It was inspired in part by the story of Sawatu out of Detroit, who had her family had come to Allied Media Conference a couple of years ago, and played a recording of the conversation that they were having with Sawatu, and it really just got us to thinking about, as we are all in this work to free Black mamas and caregivers, the stories of their children who are left behind, and to get more of a sense of how there are multiple systems that are impacting families in this way. I really thought it was important to have you on this time around, so we can make sure to amplify and lift up whole families in this conversation as well. So I just want to kick it to you, and introduce yourself to us.
So I just want to say a huge thank you for inviting us to be here. My name is Erin Cloud. I use she, her pronouns, and I work in an organization that we started called Movement for Family Power, which works to end the foster system's policing and punishment of families to create a world where the dignity and integrity of all families is valued and supported. We are unapologetically abolitionists. We believe that these systems are inherently intertwined and that the United States has a history of subordinating Black and brown bodies. This is happening in the child welfare and criminal legal systems. And this is a really important topic to us because the largest system of maternal control has historically been the child welfare system. It has started that way, it is that way, and it will continue to be that way. And understanding the way that these systems work together is that the tool of family separation, the tactic of family subordination, the tactic of separating families cannot be fixed with one system alone. It is a tactic that is used amongst all systems to provide terror, to weaken us, to ensure that we are not able to move collectively and that we will have harm within our own communities that will not be healed. And so what I come here today is to bring the story, the information, the truths of many, many families who left a cage, but were still in a cage. Left a cage, they were bailed out, but what's a mama without a child, right? They weren't able to go see their child, hold their child, touch their child, because in that moment of that arrest, of that caging, another system came in and swooped and took their child. And they can never be taken away from that child, never can be taken away from that mama. And when we're talking about what do we do to make our families whole, to make our communities whole, we really need to think about how do we get our families back together? How do we keep our families in our communities? How do we ensure that we're healing from that trauma of the arrest, right? Because that is a violent trauma that we've inflicted on the mama, on the child, as soon as there's a separation. And so the work that we do is we really try to lift up the work like JMAC for Families advocates that are doing work on the ground. People like Women in Justice Project that are talking about the fact that caretakers are 79% women in jail that are mothers, 62% in state prisons, 56% in federal prisons. They're fighting to get their kids and keep their kids. They're parenting behind bars. They're trying to figure out how to see their kids, how to make sure they can do the best that they can. And so we are really happy to share space with y'all today to really continue that conversation, to talk about what it means to actually have supportive services, because oftentimes the foster system is defaulted to be the supportive service unit because they put billions of dollars in it, yet Black mamas do not feel that to be supportive. So in this moment of thinking about building out mutual aid, building out a space where we can really think about what it really means to heal, really means to support, and really means to divest from punitive welfare disciplinary tactics and punitive spaces where we have said we've supported people, but really have funneled them back into the very systems that we are trying to remove ourselves from. So thank you so much for having us today.
I really appreciate this. And I just really appreciate y'all introducing yourselves in a way that feels very, very meaningful. And so, this is a faith and spirituality oriented panel. So, I got to come with these questions. Particularly, I really want to know, how does spiritual practice and spirituality fit into the work that you're doing with mass incarceration and abolition? I know, Ash, you and I have had a pretty deep conversation about it. So I want to turn it over to you first. And yeah, take it from there.
Word. I mean, I think it's such a great question, Paige. And I think that so often we get placed in these false dichotomies of either being like a political person or a person of faith, right? And we know that that's like a really intentional polarizing dichotomy that was created by people that were really fighting back against Christian supremacy in this country, right? In a political context. So I think there's a lot of real reasons why the dichotomy has become so sharp. But what's real is, like, quite frankly, it's some white people shit, right? That my activism is my ministry. That it is a false dichotomy to put people in a positionality where they have to choose between being abolitionists as a praxis of a political, ideological positionality versus being a person of faith. Everything that I know about my organizing is rooted in the community of faith that I come from, right? Like, I am an abolitionist because of Black liberation and womanist theology. And quite frankly, going back to what Sam said earlier, the reality is that this practice of freeing Black mamas and caregivers is not only me practicing my faith in action, right? If faith without works is dead, then it's literally what makes my faith alive, right? Is to do this. And that if I believe in something bigger than me, whether that be a God, for those of y'all that are like, people that care about theology, or even if all your faith is in the power of the people, right, on this earth right now, then the way that I worship is through the liberation of my people, right? The way I show gratitude to the thing that I have faith in is through my practice, right? So quite frankly, not only do I believe in this as a political action, I believe in it as an action regarding my faith, my gratitude for creation, my belief in the innate goodness of it, and my belief that these people are being harmed for every second that we allow them to be in a cage, and we are allowing it, right? I don't believe that we can just have a political positionality or a belief in our faith that people are good and then just say out loud that we want our people out and believe that that is enough, right? We are actually accountable, and I think held accountable not only through our faith practices, but even just on the principle of being, people of goodwill for not doing more. There is no neutrality, right? We're either supporting the liberation of our people or we're not. We're either cherishing and protecting and defending our people and the creation on this planet, or we're not, right? There's no middle ground. And so I feel excited about being in conversations with folks in communities of faith about how we actually practice that, how we practice freedom, how we practice liberation, how we practice that as a form of worship, a form of praise, a form of practicing your faith, right? And what then is the consequence when we get it right? Right? What is the consequence? Well, obviously, Black mamas and caregivers get out of jail, and that's a beautiful thing. Going back to what Sam said earlier too, it's like, then that means we can build up the supportive services to make sure that their families are taken care of, which if we had done on the front end, they probably would have never landed in jail in the first place, right? And then to Erin's point, it connects families by choice and by biology, right? Right? Building family through community building, right? So to me, because my activism is my worship, what becomes possible is a pluralism of entry points for our people to come and be activated, not only in terms of movement, but also in terms of seeing us practice what we preach around our faiths, right? Practice what we preach around the innate goodness of our people, right? It's an invitation, right? It is the altar call of saying, hey, there is room in this space, whether it's our faith community or our movements or both, because it's a false dichotomy to think about those things as two separate things in the first place. It's an invitation for our people to find us. And I think then, because of that practice, it's a pushback to these false dichotomies that we've inherited. And it clarifies not only our role, right, as people who believe in the innate goodness of our people because they are created by something beautiful and powerful and loving and excellent, right? It demands for right relationship between movements and churches and the communities that we get to every day be a part of, not because they necessarily chose us, but because we chose them, right? And it gives us an opportunity to get clear about our role it gets clear about our accountability. It gets clear about our coordination amongst each other. And it gives an opportunity for clarity about the excellence that is required of us in this moment, not perfection, but gives us an opportunity to actually do what we wish that the church or faith communities or our synagogues or our mosques or our UU congregations have been doing in the first place, that would have created a situation where maybe the dichotomy didn't need to exist in the first place.
Thank you so much, Ash, for that. There's a lot of resonating in the chat. And I think that you're putting into words a lot of struggles that a lot of folks have, including myself. I think for a long time, I found myself in organizing spaces being unapologetically Black, but feeling apologetically Muslim and not really sure how to express how my faith is something that is a motivating factor, that is something that I orient my entire life around, and that most definitely includes my activism, my organizing, my showing up for my people. And so I think it's really thanks to you, also thanks to you, Sam, and like so many other folks that I've heard that have been like this, that this is also a very spiritual thing, and that there's room for all of it. That when we're talking about you can be your whole self in a space, it really does include everything. And so I really, really appreciate that. And I also want to kick it off to you, Sam, to answer the same question. You know, where do you feel like a spiritual practice or spirituality fits into your abolition work?
Yeah. So want to shout out to Preacher Ash, the Reverend, the Honorable Reverend Ash, who made me want to throw my shoe. I could just, if I had an aisle to run up right now, it would be over. So shout out to all of that. And I mean, to add on to that, I mean, I think about organizing as faith-based work. We are building a world that we have never seen, that we are told is impossible. And yet we are building consistently towards this world because we know that that is what freedom looks like. And we deserve our heaven on earth, right? We should not have to die. Our bodies should not be sacrificed to get to that great place. We are deserving of it now. And so I view organizing in the same ways that I view faith, is that if we can hold on a little bit longer, we can be brought to, and our people can be brought to, a more just and free place. I would like to say, I think there are at least two institutions, there's probably more, get me together in the chat, but at least two institutions that are unequivocally built by Black small dollar donations. And that's juke joints and churches and houses of worship. Unequivocally built by Black small dollar donations. And I think that this bailout exists within the lineage of Black small dollar donations and some large dollar donations, right? But largely small dollar donations put in the fashion of rent parties and juke joints and passing the collection plates, which are that we can buy each other's freedom with what we have available in our pockets as community members, right? So like, if we can put $5 on freedom, if you could put $20 on freedom, can you make a commitment that is similar to tithing on commitments to each other's freedom? Because I think that with that invocation, we can actually start to shift, like place a commitment around liberation and abolition as a mandate of our faith and organizing. And then last thing is, I think of this as a direct action. And I think one impact of a direct action is healing. And there's a feeling people be transformed by being able to take power away from the state. And I've had many conversations with folks asking, well, aren't we just giving, are we not becoming the apparatus that greases the wheels of the state through this? And I think that that's an important question. And there's two things that we know. One is that by stepping in and stopping the backbreaking that bail bondsmen are doing to our people, we are actually taking power away from the succubus capitalist arm of the bail industry that fuels a lot of the political will to keep bail in practice. And two, we know that we actually have a very different intention in the bail bonds industry, which is not to extract succubus labor from families, but is to invite people in to the doors of movement so that we can together break this strong arm of this ransom of our people. And so we actually, I feel in the lineage um, of both collecting, like offering collectivism in this moment. Like we are offering families and communities a way to step in and build the type of power we need to stop, to end cash bail, to end risk assessments, to end mass incarceration and incarceration period. But we can actually do this as a community because it is our right to build our beloved community and our beloved way of being here on earth.
Thank you so much, Sam. I had to write down what you were saying about removing power away from the state and this being this direct action and this is spiritual work too. I want to kick it over to you, Erin, because in many ways your work is directly related to removing power from the state. And so how do you find that this is connecting in a spiritual way for you?
So I'm really happy to go third because I can say what they said. And, you know, the one thing I want to add is that I am a deeply spiritual person and really come to this work with a lot of spirituality that I don't often talk about because a lot of things that Ash talked about, there is a lot of oppression, a lot of dichotomies. But I really think it's incredibly important to understand that this work is spiritual and it also requires us to not make decisions of who is worthy. And I think that the spirituality that I feel in this space is, and what keeps me motivated in a different way is that it's not about what you did or didn't do, not what you are alleged to have done. Like literally people do shit, like they do harm, right? And the spirituality for me is this is not a place of judgment. We are here together to be a community together, whether you have done harm or not have done harm, and we have to figure this shit out and how to heal together. And to me, there's nothing more spiritual about the faith of believing that we can heal together, that we can be accountable, we can create boundaries. Like those things are also a part of healing and moving forward. But we do not need to punish. We do not need to cage. We can be something that is bigger, that is collective, that is beautiful. And so for me, my yes and to all the things that Ash and Samantha said is all those things. And we're all worthy. We're all worthy. We're all enough. And we're all in this together.
Thank you. Yes, we are all in this together. I just want to lift up some things that were coming up in the chat because I just think it's really important to hear what folks are saying. Also, you know, Samantha Master is a preacher too. It's not just Ash, okay? So I just want to make sure that you know that and you get your gold star for that amazing word. And I also want to lift up a lot of resonance that Aisha Hauser, who is a great comrade and friend of BLUU and of me personally, talking about. Really resonating with this idea that we are all worthy and we can all heal together, and that these methods of justice making, going beyond restoring a broken system, that we are really in need of a transformation. And I think that more than ever, particularly in this pandemic moment, more folks are kind of drawing similar conclusions of going back to normal not really being an option. And so I want to just like touch on that a little bit, because I think that when it comes to abolition, a lot of people don't really know where to begin to thinking about it, and that a lot of times it's something, it's easy to get into the framework of thinking about everything that won't work. And so for folks out here, whether they are faith folks or not, how do you suggest that people crack open their imaginations of what is possible? I leave that open to anybody to take that one.
So I can jump in. I mean, I think a couple of things. And again, I think a lot of this is just repeating the brilliance that my comrades Erin and Samantha have already said. But when I think about how hard it is to wrap our brains around abolition, I hear one of my elders, Gwen Patton, in my head saying, "Keep it simple," right? And so I would push, quite frankly, on our colleagues and comrades who would say, like, abolition is just so impossible. One, because abolition is a process, not a destination. And we can get more into about that in the Q&A, about what I mean. But also because we see abolition every day, y'all. Let me give you an example. How many times have you seen a rich, white, able-bodied, heterosexual man create harm, but get grace and mercy, right? Where, you know, a suburban white kid has created harm, usually gendered, usually racialized, and the option was like, let's get that kid help, not put that kid in a cage, right? So again, this goes back to what Erin was saying earlier about like who deserves abolition, right? The question is it possible? Because we see it all the time in the United States, of white people creating harm and getting grace and mercy, of rich people creating harm and getting grace and mercy, right? This is about everybody having access to that, right? Both because it's what everybody deserves, right? I'm not saying I don't want it for these other people either, right? I'm saying I want what they get for all of us, right? And I'm not even just talking about the uber privileged ones, right? Sure, let me talk about myself, because surely y'all are the saints that don't do anything wrong, right? Let me talk about myself and about how there were times where I did exactly what my baby brother did, but he ended up in jail and I didn't, right? Because I knew this lingo, right? Because I had movement people that I could call, right? Because I wasn't, you know, somebody that looked like a poor Black gangbanger, right? I got grace and mercy, right? I wasn't tracked in school. I wasn't tracked to go to like alternative institutions, right? I was tracked because I could take a test to go to college, whereas so many of the kids that grew up in my neighborhood that literally came from the same level of poverty, their skin color was the same as mine, right? They didn't get those same options. So many of us, quite frankly, have created harm, but didn't end up in cages, right? So what does it look like to expand that grace and mercy, that expectation that everybody can be transformed, right? Like I could not practice my faith if I didn't believe that people could be transformed. I would not continue to organize if I didn't believe that people could be transformed. So quite frankly, this whole excuse that we give ourselves to try to stay neutral, and again, I don't believe neutrality exists, is really just a cop-out, considering that we've seen it over and over again. And the question isn't, could it happen? We see it happen. The question is, what are we going to be willing to do? What risk are we willing to take to make sure that the privileges that some people get are extended to everybody? The last thing that I would say is to Sam's point, like, yeah, like we deserve heaven on earth right now. Again, that's what everybody deserves. It's what my creator, it's what my ancestors want for me, right? And it's what they want, I believe, for all people, whether I like them, whether I agree with what they did, whether, you know, I have political disagreement with them, whatever. Like everybody deserves this abolition process, this abolition destination that I know we can get to. And for your point, Paige, about faith, it's like, you know, people ask me all the time, like, why I don't browbeat people with my Christianity, right? And quite frankly, I've never had to, right? I've never had to. Because I think that if we practice what we preach, people would know something was different about us, regardless of what your faith background is. And when I say faith, I'm not just talking about like the belief in a deity or the belief in another world, or a belief in an ancestral realm, right? What I'm talking about is if you've ever been in the streets and chanted, "Ain't no power like the power of the people, because the power of the people don't stop." If you've ever chanted, right, that, you know, the people united will never be defeated, I promise you that I cannot touch, taste, smell, hear, or touch that, right? There's no quantifiable evidence to prove that. So you are practicing through this attempt to build beloved community, this attempt to fight back against the state, this attempt to break down the barriers that capitalism and white supremacy are creating for us. You are literally practicing a belief in something bigger that could create a better world right here and now, right? So I don't think you have to believe in a God or in any sort of like spiritual do-gooder stuff to be about this life, and that we could literally take what we are already seeing in terms of practicing abolition, and we could apply it to everybody. I think that's the goal.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. I wanna just highlight that a lot of folks are resonating, and I just want to thank you for your vulnerability about speaking on something that is a personal story. I think oftentimes that can be missed when we're talking about these things, when we're talking about abolition, or when we're talking about the restorative justice, or the multitude of things that in movement faces we find ourselves speaking on, is that we can kind of remove our personal narratives from that, and just how strong a good testimony really is. So I just wanted to highlight that. And I do want to move us along because I'm already getting caught up. I'm so glad I have a timekeeper. I am so enthralled in this conversation. But what's real is that we can continue to speak about this so much. And people are really wanting to know, what does it mean to connect in this work? How can we go from having the conversations that we're all really great at having to putting our boots on the ground and rolling up our sleeves? And also that you don't have to identify as an organizer or an activist to be able to support this work, to support all of y'all's work. So I want to ask, and I want to start with Erin. What does it look like for folks? What does it look like for folks to get involved in this work? And what are they up against? Not just for like a people from a congregation or religious professional, but for your average person.
So when you say you want to abolish the prison system, the jail system, people are going to be like, okay, maybe, but not people that are violent. If you say you also then want to abolish the foster care system and our punitive systems of other social control, people are like, get out of my face, right? So what it looks like to do this work that is Black-led, that really is about loving and deep spiritual connection to our community, is like, you gotta be fucking courageous, but you also gotta really go back to believing that we can do this and believing that we have been taken over and co-opted. And that is challenging, right? And so for the work that we do, you know, there are things that people believe are not redeemable. And I think handling that first is important, right? Like, people might say people can be free, but they're like, I don't believe that, I actually don't believe in Black motherhood. And I want to just say that, I want to say that for real. Like, they don't really like the Black mama. Like, they want them out of a cage, but they actually don't love her. They don't love that person. They don't love that parenting person. And so it is not sufficient to eliminate a physical barrier. It is not sufficient to eliminate a legal barrier. It is not sufficient to do this because you think paying some money to let someone out is freedom. If you're going to engage in this work, you have to engage in real liberation and real freedom and figure out how to do the beloved community. And again, beloved community, loving that Black mama isn't always gonna be like, oh, we all get along. We don't always get along in this shit. Like, that's not true. But it is about faith. It is about commitment. It is about saying, I'm not going to leave I'm not going to reject, and I'm not going to be the determination of the worthiness. And so the work that we do in community with families, that's long term. Families don't stop at the moment that someone is bailed out. Families have been ruptured, and that's going to last forever. Every single time a person goes in a cage, you have impacted at least 2 generations of that family. And so if you do this work, you commit to that. You commit to those multi-generational impacts of those single moments. And it's going to look so many different ways. But that's the commitment that we have to do and the work that we have to do.
Erin, we had a couple of questions that I want to bring up a little bit more specifics around the system of child welfare, and also when you're talking about a multi-generational impact from a single interaction, what does that mean? What does that look like?
So I'm going to give a couple of good examples. So first, I want to talk about the fact that there is this law called the Adoption Safe Families Act, and it has this ticking time frame. So essentially, it gives a parent 15 months to get their child back, and then after those 15 months, the state has to file a termination of parental rights. So when we're thinking about the incarceration of caretakers and those statistics that we started off in the very beginning, ASFA doesn't care whether or not you're alleged of a crime, whether you're too poor to bail yourself out. It doesn't care, right? What ASFA cares about is it's 15 months. And there are many people who are incarcerated pre-trial for at least that length of time, right? So one thing that we know is that literally getting someone out of the cage, it gives them a fighting chance to maintain their family and maintain their legal rights over their children, because termination of parental rights is the civil death penalty. You are considered a legal stranger. You can not see that kid, talk to that kid. You have no rights for that child any longer. And so that's one just really concrete example. The second example is that, again, as we discussed, the cage is not just physical. The cage exists no matter what, right? So when we think about our child welfare system, it originates really in a very gendered perspective. It became its most violent when 40% of children were Black in the system. It has historical roots in taking immigrant children and stealing Indigenous children. Those are its historical roots, and has deeply been about controlling caretaking to socialize towards white middle class norms. It is often not a conversation or history that we uplift and understand. And so because we don't uplift and understand it, people perceive it to be benign. They perceive it to be an institution that is helpful. And what that has done is that has created disproportionate support systems for people that are working within the system than for many of the Black mamas. So specifically, that means you're not accessing the same level of even just social supports if you are not a foster parent, right? You don't get access to respite, daycare vouchers. You're not getting the same amount of monthly checks. You're not getting access to the same level of healthcare, those types of benefits. And all of those are related to these ideas of who is the deserving, who deserves to have our children, deserves to have our families. And unfortunately, that puts people in really, really, really hard positions, right? You're coming out of jail, you're fighting to get your child back. The child is with someone who's now has more supports and government supports, and you're bearing the stigma of the system that says that you are not deserving, both because you are Black and you are a caretaker in our society, which already puts you back, and you have been incarcerated, right? That is perceived to be already a bad thing. And so those things together makes it a challenge. And then it's you versus a timeline to get your child back. So now you have to face all these requirements on top of the other requirements that you may have to face for your criminal legal case to get your child back. And if you live in a place that doesn't have expanded Medicaid, you're having to go through the child welfare system to access any of those supports to get your children back. And so it's incredibly challenging, it's incredibly demoralizing. And also what we have not done a ton of work around or a ton of research around, we as in society, is the trauma and impact on the caretaker, right? The mama, of what does it mean to come out and go to a home and not see your child in the bed that you laid for them every day? What does it mean to go out and everyone say you're a bad mama? What does it mean to wake up in the morning and not hear those sounds, those rustling noises of your kid walking around? That shit fucks you up. It really does. And so how do we care? How do we support that? And that may not look like the beautiful trauma experiment and the trauma porn that we love to see, where someone just like cries their heart out to you. That may manifest in all the ways trauma manifests, right? And so how do we love that? How do we work on that? And how do we support that? And so those two good concrete examples, I feel like now I'm gonna just go on a tirade if you keep me going at this point, you know?
That was so good. That was so good. And I think what I want to ask is, for somebody who's listening or watching right now, who maybe they don't even know anyone who's been directly impacted, or maybe they do, but they just don't have any idea. But they're like, yo, I really like, I'm moved. What is a couple of concrete things that they can do as in an entry point?
So the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls is organizing around ASFA to dismantle ASFA. So a very specific thing you can do is give to them and give to the work that's supporting ASFA. Other specific work we have on our website, Movement for Family Power, under our COVID section, we have very specific mutual aid supports that are going out to people that are trying to support diapers in communities, formula, as well as alternative childcare supports. I think that's something that we don't talk a lot about. I mean, we're in a pandemic, and we do need breaks from our children, and figuring out how to like support each other in safe ways to get those spaces in childcare co-ops. Anyone can go and look that up. I also think obviously giving and supporting national bailout, like people can't fight to keep their kids. It's much harder to fight to keep your kids if you are beyond in the cage. So you got to get free so we can continue to move towards increased freedom. So those would be 3 concrete steps that I would offer up today.
Thank you so much. You know, I love a good list. You give me a good 1, 2, 3, it really works. And just to let everybody know who's watching, BLUU is going to be putting together like a resource list and some action steps, so that for folks who are wanting the TLDR about how do I get involved, it's very easy to find those. And also just want to point people to the chat. Ashley's in there, Atina and Asia, folks from Team Sankofa are in here to try to field your questions that are things that we can kind of answer with a link. I want to kick it to Sam and ask a similar question, like for folks who are like who are moved and who whether they're members of congregations or just a single person, what does it look like to get involved in this work, not just for a Mother's Day bailout, but for the long haul?
Yeah. So a few things. One is if you are moved to give or galvanize resources, right? Like sometimes it's giving and galvanizing. It's go to, for the national bailout, nationalbailout.org, which is the national bailout. And then if you would like to give to the DMV bailout, it's dmvbailout.com, and you can give there. If you are looking to learn more, NBO has a really dope toolkit of learning just kind of the context and the lay of the land about why a bailout, like why is that the particular entry point we're talking about mass incarceration in this country through. And I think that it actually makes it really difficult. I think, Paige, I'm so grateful for you leading us here, you in LA, because I think that as people of faith, it can be difficult to unlearn punishment. Like there is so much about religious texts that justifies suffering through punishment. And so what abolition has really taught me is decoupling accountability from punishment. And that there is a decoupling of that, right? Because I do not want to punish people. And our criminal legal framework is around how do we take away the most humanity from people possible. So let me paint this picture for you. People who are sitting in jail cells, if you have not had the misfortune of sitting in a jail cell, or you have taken a rest and not necessarily thought about the conditions of folks who did not get up, thinking that they would be in a cage by the end of the day. The concrete walls of the jails are meant to take away your humanity. Like if you have, I know in DC jail, it's like one really big, heavy door with a very, very small window that makes you feel like you are suffocating. And it makes you lose sense of time and space. Like we are all, it is collectively experiencing the quarantine without any niceties, and without the pleasure of Netflix. Like it's meant to make you lose your sense of time. The ways that guards interact with folks that make them feel like they are removed from the spectrum of humanity. And so it may feel like, it may feel less intrinsic to not want to punish people. But what we're really doing is like dealing with what it means to be accountable without punishment. And I think that that's something that we really do need to decouple from our religious beliefs and our religious upbringing. And so again, 3 things that you can do if you're feeling moved: donate to the National Bailout, donate to your local bail fund, share, and learn.
Thank you so much. Ash, any last thoughts about ways that folks can really engage in this work for the next couple of weeks and also for the duration?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think just to build off what my comrades have said, particularly this last piece, that Sam really just gave us a gift, and I want to make sure we don't miss it, right? Accountability and punishment are not synonyms, right? And what I mean is that they don't mean the same thing, right? Accountability without grace and mercy is punishment. That doesn't work with our abolitionist politic, right? And that's what we demand of Black mamas and caregivers all too often, right? Because again, I think it goes back to what Erin says, because like we don't actually love the people. And the tradition that I come from, like Chokwe Lumumba said, if you don't love the people, you'll betray the people. And we betray the people with because we try to be neutral, or because we try to be like we're complicit, right? We ask for the grace and mercy that we don't offer, right? And quite frankly, grace and mercy without accountability, which is all too often what our faith communities expect, and in regards to like the demands that movements are putting out, we get despite our inaction. And even though that makes us complicit in the harm that's happening for our people, right? So what we're asking for, what Paige and what BLUU is actually creating an opportunity for, is for us to stop being complicit in the harm of other people, right? It's to actually practice being accountable while also giving ourselves grace and mercy for the ways that we might mess it up, even though we're trying to make sure that we're building this road to freedom while we walk it, right? We're literally practicing liberation live, right? So I think if I was thinking about what we have to offer is, one, like stepping up, like making a commitment that we're going to do something, as imperfect as it might be, to support the ongoing work that is led by Black people, particularly Black women and gender nonconforming people, right? And not allowing there's the field is noisy now that Black people have popularized bailing folks out, right? There's a lot of folks, a lot of churches are like, okay, I want to do it. And I want to center it around being able to decide, like Erin said, who deserves justice and who deserves grace and mercy, right? The national bailout that's led by Black folks does not practice in that way. We believe everybody deserves grace and mercy, and that there's many, many more practical, efficient, and community building ways of being in a practice of healing together, right? So I think the first thing is like identify if there are people already in your community that are connected with the National Bailout Collective. You're going to get an email from BLUU after this that gives you a list of where people are at, right? See if you're in a place that already has one. If you're in a place that doesn't already have a National Bailout movement, a group that's moving to get Black mamas and caregivers out of cages on Mama's Day, which is coming up, then see if there's one somewhere where they maybe don't have the kind of clerical or faith community support that they deserve, right? Let me break that down. What do you mean, Ashley? Well, I'm glad you asked. I live in the US South. It's the largest geographic region in the United States. It's like 1 in 3 American residents lives in my region. Also, the majority of Black people in this country live in my region. It's the Bible Belt of the country, right? But it is highly likely that the relationships that we have with our clergy, with our faith communities, is probably stressed and tense at best because of the connection between Christian supremacy and white supremacy where I live. It's probably true everywhere, but you know, everybody looks at the South as the place where that's the concentration. So again, I'm just going to talk about my folks because y'all got it together, right? All the coastal elites, right? So maybe you might want to find a bailout in a place in a region where you assume that they are having a hard time in terms of building relationships with clergy and communities of faith, and to support them, right? How can you use your positionality, your power, your privilege to help to support those folks, especially recognizing that that region only has 4% of philanthropic dollars coming to support their work, right? But I think there's like the commonsensical, right? Like you could give a donation, you could, you know, build relationship with a local bailout. If there's an absence altogether and you really can't find anybody that's doing it where you are, you could start it. There's a bailout toolkit on the National Bailout website, right? So you could figure out how to start it. But I think there's some work to be done right before that too. Some questions to ask yourself, right? Because I think if we go into it because we feel guilty, because we've been inactive, or we go into it because we believe that we got this webinar, so we got it together and we're ready to go all full steam ahead, we'll mess up. So I want to slow us down a bit and call us to question a few things. Because I think if we could build some clarity and connection with people who are most directly impacted, not already mobilized movement folks, it could keep us from making some really juvenile mistakes in regards to getting involved in this movement. So some questions that I would throw out to you is like, who leads, right? Is it those of us that have never really spent time in Cage, right? Whose leadership are we centering, right? And who decides that, right? What are you gonna do? Like exactly what Erin said, right? Like getting a mama out of a jail cell is not getting a mama freedom. It's getting a mama out of a jail cell. And that's a degree of freedom. That's a degree of liberation. But if we haven't thought through how we're going to do the supportive services, if we haven't pushed back against this idea that we should be assessing their risk, not their need, then we are setting up these mamas, right? We're setting up these caregivers. So who leads? Who decides? What does truly flanking movement leaders and directly impacted communities look like that increase their opportunities to successfully exercise self-determination and power building without dictating to them what is good and right work, right? So going back to what Erin said, right? Like, what does it look like to practice this work in a way that centers the leadership of the most directly impacted, increases the amount of power that they have to self-determine, and doesn't put us, not directly impacted people, in the driver's seat to dictate who are the people that deserve getting out and who are the ones that don't. I think that those initial questions around who deserves grace and mercy are really ones that our faith communities have to struggle with, and then putting that into practice in terms of whose leadership we support is going to be really critical. And I say that both for the success of our attempts at doing this work as faith communities, but I also say that because then the simple thing about amplifying the voices of the people that have already been doing this work well is critical. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard white national nonprofits get credit for the work of the National Bailout Collective. I can't tell you how many white-led bailouts across this country are getting money that should rightfully be going to the Black Mama's Day bailout, but is going to white people who are dictating who can and cannot get out of cages. And we've got to do better than that. And I think that our faith communities can be at the forefront of leading the movement to make sure that the folks that are most directly impacted are the ones that are amplified and get the resources to be able to get even more people out.
Yes, yes, yes. Snaps all around. Listen, the chat's been going off. It's amazing. And I just want to thank you for also really sharing in my vision, because I really believe that faith communities could really be doing some amazing things with this work. And, you know, we brought up white people, and, you know, this is Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. So that means that if y'all don't know, let me break it down. A majority of Unitarian Universalist congregations are overwhelmingly white. I'm not saying anything new, but this is what it is. And so somebody in the chat had raised this question, which is what is a way that, or I guess, how could folks that are in these majority white congregations avoid the pitfalls of engaging in this work and potentially causing more harm? And also having this like sense of white saviorism, like how can you, what kind of advice do you have to like help folks check that and avoid doing that so that this work can be done in the right way? Sam, yep, yes.
Okay. I mean, there are an abundance of answers, and I would love to hear from my co-panelists about some ways that they've seen that they really rock with. I think for me, there's been 3 things that are helpful, and this speaks to what William Ash just put forward, which is who is leading the work. One of the things that we knew in the DMV is that we wanted to be in coalition and community with directly impacted women, with folks who had been behind the wall for a significant period of time. And so we after a few years of not necessarily being in leadership coalition, we decided that we were going to shift some things, right? Because we knew we needed that. So who is in leadership and doing an audit and assessment of that? I would say this, I think that we live in an era where professionalism, where like community building is often professionalized. And I know 2 things. I know one, I'm gonna show up for folks when they say they need support in the ways that I can, right? And I want to be honest about that from the beginning. And I want to be, I want to build authentic relationships with folks. And so I do not want to actually be in a space where I am doing this really great thing for one day a year, and then I back away and I decommit myself to the people who we build out. I mean, one thing I love about all of the work I've seen from NBO across the country when you are under Black women's leadership is that we are intent on, we're building relationships in the communities we exist in and we live in. And so we stay in touch with our people. We like check in with our folks. We want to be in right relationship with those. And that's not just an intention, but we want to be in conversation with our folks about what does this mean to you? And I think once we are clear that incarcerated people are people and people have a right to consent to the ways they live their lives. How can I support you? And like, what does that look like for you? And as much and as little as you want, is like how I would build a relationship with any other person in my life. And it's how I intend to build relationships with formerly incarcerated people that we bail out. And that means that I have to see you as human and not as a projection of what America says you should be.
Yeah, amen to what Reverend Master said. You know, I also think sometimes we make finger painting into rocket science around some of this stuff, right? It's like, again, I think I've never been a white person. So I can't speak to the inner conflicts that, you know, or perceptions that white people may have in regards to navigating doing the right thing because it's the right thing, or doing the right thing because it makes you feel like you're saving people. I can't speak to that. I can speak about the impact it's had on my life, which is significant. But what I can do is I can ask other white colleagues and white comrades questions that hopefully provoke you to doing some real homework, which is your responsibility to do before you know, engaging in harmful practices as you attempt to also be in right relationship with folks. So the questions that I would raise, and I'll try to be slow, also knowing that we're over time. So I'm going to ask y'all to also just be patient with us, because I think we're getting a lot of good learning in together. It's like, who gets to define right relationship, right? Is it you as a white person? Or is it the people that are most directly impacted by the ways that white supremacy and the systems that rich white people in particular have been able to create that have marginalized other humans, right? And if it's those humans, right? And I love metaphors. I was an English major. I love metaphors. So let me use a metaphor. If I was asking you out, right? If I was like, I'm into you, I want to date you, but I want to date you in these ways that I like, right? Let's say I like bowling. You might hate bowling, but I don't really care because I want to date you and I want to do the things that I like. You probably wouldn't want to go out with me, right? And if you told me over and over again that you didn't like it, that you didn't like it, that you didn't like it, and I still kept trying to push you to be dated by me in the way that only I got to dictate, you might be like, Ash is a little like narcissistic. Everything revolves around Ash. So I would offer that to my white colleagues to be like, what happens if you switch the table in that way? And you actually approach this work from a place of deep curiosity, right? And a commitment to deeply listening, not just talking about what you already know, right? I would also say, I would say who defines the partnership? And I think if Black people, particularly Black mamas and caregivers are the folks that you're trying to be in partnership with, then I would say then like, listen to them, follow their leadership. And that doesn't mean assume that they're perfect and that they can't be pushed politically, right? We're not, just because we're Black or directly impacted doesn't mean we know everything, but it does mean we know a lot, right? And so it means be in principled struggle with us, right? The second thing that I would say is that I think that there is a responsibility that is on the shoulders of white people to not just get comfortable doing this racial justice work with people that don't look like you, right? It's like, if you are a white person right now and you want to get involved in the movement to stop Cash Money Bail from breaking up families and destroying communities, then I have curiosities around what your responsibility is to organize other white people who believe that they can be neutral, other white people who believe that they can just sit on the sidelines and be like, Democratic voters, but not actually support the folks that are on the front lines pushing for progressive policies, pushing for the end of money bail, by bailing people out, pushing for the implementation of supportive services and direct services and the like. So what is your responsibility to organize other white people, right? And to pull them, other faith people, other privileged people, into alignment with this politic that then moves them to an entry point of action around supporting it somehow, whatever that gift is, right? And then the period on the sentence I would say is like, definitely support national bailout, because what's real is like Black people are disproportionately impacted by the cash money bail system. But as a Southerner, a person from the working class and a rural person, I also know that a lot of these folks that are directly impacted, more and more becoming visible, are white people that are being locked up because of the opioid crisis, right? So it's like, what's good for Black people is good for everybody. So what is your responsibility to organize other white people to understand that for the liberation of your own people? This is an opportunity for you to also figure that out. So I think like the biggest thing to me is like, what is a right relationship, a right accountable relationship with the people that are most directly impacted? And then what is your responsibility to organize your cousins, your sisters, your neighbors, the folks that go to your UU church, right? To also fall in step in alignment with that.
I'm just going to add to what everyone's saying. I think it's really important to do that in every space that you're trying to show up in, right? Like, you can't say, well, I'm going to work with these like 3 groups that are led by directly impacted people that are bailing people out, but then I'm just going to just get a chunk of money to what I believe is social services, right? If you've never received welfare and lived on that check, if you've never had to survive in certain communities, like, you just can't just drop your money in places that people are saying, like, these are harmful for me. They don't actually help me. They've actually reported the secrets that I've been trying to work on and healing to other places. So I think sometimes, when we're thinking about these issues and we are in spaces of privilege, we push our resources into the place where we center our sympathies. So we are centering our sympathies on ending incarceration on a very limited concept, right? Like the physical jail, right? And yet that privilege stops us from really understanding the real life that someone is experiencing, which is not just that one location that we as someone who's accessing privilege are like focusing our time, our reading, our Netflix videos that we're watching, all of our ways of self-educating, right? So I just would just ask and just like reiterate that as we are thinking about support in a whole community, that we are really, really, really centering impacted people on a broad scale of what it means to be impacted.
Yes, yes. Thank y'all. So what's really dope is that because of our collective genius, we've been answering all of these questions that have been coming up in the chat. I think that between all of the panelists, Mary, we've gotten a pretty clear understanding about what local UUs can do to support abolition. Danny had raised a question about, as we move towards a new normal, how do we take all of these beliefs, goals, and movements and push them towards the forefront of the changes that need to happen? And I think that we've done a really great way. We've answered that question in a lot of ways. And I think, you know, this work is enduring work. And if you've been paying attention, BLUU has been increasing the bar of like how we're asking for folks to engage. And so, yes, donate your time and educate yourself and ask these questions, do power mapping. How can you, I think that that's something that comes up often in congregations. And I think I can say with some liberty that this goes beyond UU congregations, which is so often these social justice issues become a pet project of the social justice person or two in a congregation. And so in order to really flex your power as an organization, as an institution, what does it mean to have collective buy-in? What does it mean for particularly clergy to step up and really engage in this work and integrate it into the communal life of your congregation? You know, as the weeks go by and as more and more stuff is going to be transpiring with COVID-19, there's going to be a whole lot of energy around a lot of things. We have a presidential election coming up, which in some strange way for a lot of folks feels like something that is like not in the forefront. And so what does it mean to be committing to pushing forward this work in a variety of ways, in creative ways, recognizing that this is a marathon. You know, we talked about this in the last Babies and Bailouts. You know, like the bailouts is a tactic. It's not like the grand end all be all. And so I think having spaces like these and encouraging folks to continue to like watch these videos and like have these conversations is really important. And so, yeah, I feel like I think that it's a lot and it can be overwhelming, but also we really don't need to overcomplicate it. And I think that Ash did a really great job of pointing out that it really starts with like self-work, and it starts with a collective assessment about what power looks like in our communities, in our faith groups, and other collectives that we have, and that this is work that does not need, you know, you don't need to identify as the organizer or like the sole social justice person to engage in this. This is stuff that affects all of us. Worthiness, these questions that we're having about what does justice look like. So often we're really quick to talk about families, but we don't consider all the different types of families and how they are impacted by the state. With that, I want to just not reiterate, but I want to open up a few things about engaging in this work. We talked about dropping a dime for the national bailout. That's really important work, and you are ensuring that your funds are going to the right folks who have proven year after year that not only are they doing tremendous work, but they're evaluating, they're shifting, they're changing, they're developing long-term strategy. And I can personally attest to that. And I'm happy to answer questions offline, well, I guess online, but off of this call to delve deeper into this. I also just want to say, and I said this before, but I want to make it clear that that BLUU is challenging for congregations, even in this critical moment, even when congregations are not gathering physically, to adopt a bailout. So we're going to have a list of bailouts in your area, or not. Adopt one. And what that looks like for us, for BLUU, is that we are working in partnership with Justice Gatson from the Real Justice Network. And we're doing this because we've been working with them and in a variety of projects, and we really believe in what they're doing. And what that looks like for us is to say, okay, what do you need? Like, what is a money goal? Where do you feel like there are gaps in the aftercare and what happens? And like, how can we reach out to folks in our networks to say, you know, we need folks to volunteer for participatory defense, or we need for folks to volunteer for court watching. There are so many ways that folks can engage in this work and really learn what this justice system looks like on the inside. And so again, if you signed up to register, you will get an email. I'll also send the same message out through our constant contact, so you can sign up for our mailing list to get this. And we are really in this for the long haul. I also just want to say that if you would have asked me last year if this year we would have been having a conversation and very explicitly talking about abolition, I would have definitely raised some eyebrows. But here we are, and folks are really ready to engage in this work. So on May 4th, we're going to be having a whole virtual week of action around abolition, and collaborating with a bunch of really dope folks who have been doing this work. So like, let's dig in deeper together, particularly while we are all in front of screens, and maximize our time as best as we can. Also, Team Sankofa has come up with a facilitator's guide for last year's Babies and Bailouts, which is kind of providing some concrete information. And so you can download that and be able to like host some sort of like watch party with folks in your congregation, and be able to have a very curated conversation where it's a very plug and play thing. And we have provided resources, but really it's up to you. It's up to you all to take that first step, and to continue doing this work. This is not this doesn't end on Mother's Day. And it's certainly not going to end with whoever gets voted in to so-called lead our country come November and January. And so this is stuff that involves really shifting our concept of what is real and what is possible for our communities and for the world. And I really want to thank Ashley, Samantha, and Erin for coming on here authentically and in a very real way, and helping us to engage in this work. And hopefully for some of us, we're just recommitted to it. And for others of us, this is going to be our first time doing this work. And I just want to invite folks to continue to share this live stream and push for all sorts of different faith communities and spiritual communities to engage in this. And so with that, I want to open it up to our panelists for any last words, and then I'll kick it over to LA to lead us on out of here.
Word. I was trying to see if others wanted to jump in, but I'll jump in. I think that it is a marathon, comrades, and welcome to it if this is your first entry to it. But what I'd also say is that we can't let knowing that it's a long haul fight be an excuse to not do what we can and should do in the here and now. And BLUU has offered so many entry points, so many ways of taking what you've got and taking what you know to start to do something, anything, to ensure that we're centering the leadership of Black mamas and caregivers that are disproportionately impacted by mass incarceration in the bail system, the cash money bail system. That you can do something. If you ain't got no money, you got a Facebook page, you can amplify the National Bailout Collective. If you ain't got a Facebook page, but you know how to write a letter, you could do that. If you got a clerical collar and you know that you can get access into these jails and prisons and detention centers, these juvenile facilities, and you can let us know who are the disproportionately impacted people in there that need getting out, you can do that. There's just no excuse to do nothing. And that doing nothing, again, is not neutral, y'all. That it literally is contributing and being complicit in the harm of our people. And that is not the way of our faiths, regardless of what it is, right? Regardless of the background of your faith. That you have to do something, that faith without works is dead. And so I want you to take the time to do the reflection individually and collectively to say, what can we do? What can we do in regards to the bailout? What can we do in terms of this fight for liberation for all people and for building beloved communities? And how can we do that in a way where we're being honest that that's not selfless work, right? We're not doing that because it's selfless. We're doing it because it's our obligation. We're doing that because it also creates entry points for people to find the place that could be their home for that long haul, right? It's like y'all helping us bail out Black mamas and caregivers isn't just good for Black mamas and caregivers, it's also good for you. It's a part of your own liberation. It's a part of creating community with people that are the most directly impacted, some of the most amazing people that God created, right? So I encourage you to figure out what it is that you can do, what you can contribute, and get to it. That lives are literally on the line for every second that you don't get active. So excited to be in right relationship and building with you all, and know that Highlander and the Movement for Black Lives and the National Bailout Collective and all of us on this call are always at your service if you need a little bit of a helping hand to figure it out.
Yeah, I would just say the same thing. I really appreciate the space and time here tonight. And just to kind of piggyback off of Ash's words about it being a marathon. And this is meant to be inspirational, but not, I'm not always the best at being like a hopeful, inspirational person. But, faith means endurance. Faith means that things will be hard, right? This is not philanthropy, this is liberation. And so the work that we are asking for investment in means that it may not always be pretty. It may not always be immediately successful. It may not always be what people say is right or wrong. It is an investment in liberation for people who've never had power in this country ever. And shifting that power and getting in right relationship to that power will be an endeavor that requires spirituality, requires an idea of faith that goes beyond an idea of an immediate happy ending. It will have a happy ending, the liberation will come, but we will have trials and tribulations into that moment. And so I just really appreciate people being here, and I really hope that we commit to the journey of the process of abolition.
What is there to say after these two brilliant folks have just laid down all of the ways, like they've laid down the foundation for freedom, and now we just get to walk the path. But y'all, another world is possible, and we are seeing it. Capitalism's flip is showing, her eyelashes are coming off, honey, her wig is on the corner behind us. I mean, another world is possible, and we have an imperative in this moment to put pressure on all of the levers of power to make a better world a reality in our lifetimes. And it is a I am grateful to be alive at the same time as you, to say that in some ways, in virtual ways and in real ways, we have breathed the same air, and that we are contributing to this machine of power building and liberation together, y'all. And so keep going, keep doing, keep writing emails, keep dropping coins, keep building with each other and building right relationship. And thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you to all of the folks who are joining us on Zoom, on Facebook Live, who will watch this. We are so incredibly blessed by your presence here this evening. I want to offer to y'all a virtual laying on of hands. So if you can get into a posture that, as our colleague Ash says, is a posture of worship, because in our acts of liberation, in our embodiment of practitioners of liberation, we are indeed doing worship. Omnipotent crew of ancestors, Harriet, Mary, Sojourner, Jimmy, Bayard, and Audrey. Ancestors known and unknown, be with us in this moment. Grant to us the spirit of the great believing as we leave this space, empowered with your love, your light, and your courage, equipped as abolitionists for the liberation of your people. Go with us, before us, next to us, and behind us. Give us strength when the journey gets long. Give us joy in times of despair. Anoint the heads, the feet, the spirit, and the souls of each and every person active in this work. And as we arrive in this work, as we arrive in our purpose and on our purpose, allow us to go with grace and mercy as participants in this project of liberation and abolition. Ashe and blessed be. Go in peace, y'all.
Ashe and blessed be. Thank you all for joining in. And we bid you a wonderful and beautiful week. We'll be in touch, and we are very much available and accessible. If you have any questions or need assistance, we're nothing more than an email, a Facebook message, or a post away. I want to thank these amazing panelists, Ashley, Woodard Henderson, Samantha Master, and Erin Miles Cloud. I love you all so much. Thank you to LA, and thank you to Team Sankofa, those who are on here and those who are in the group chat, keeping it real, doing all the things that I can just sit back and do my thing. Words cannot describe how amazing this journey has been, and we are just beginning. So with that, take care, y'all.